Start the recording. And we will pick up with integration. Okay, we already talked about the integration concept yesterday. Out of the box, open integration, holistic integration, and AI-driven integration as much as possible. And then we talked about the Cloud Platform Integration Suite, took a look at the Discovery Center, all of the different integration resources and tools that are available there. Let's just reiterate what is kind of the hallmark of integration. We need to have something that sends messages between two different systems. That thing is an API or an application programming interface. So this is a messenger that takes a request and tells the target system what to do and returns the response back to the requesting system. Regardless of the type of integration that you set up, whether it's process orchestration integration or cloud platform integration, whether it's point-to-point or uses middleware to facilitate communication, there's always something facilitating a message going from point A to point B. So application programming interfaces, an example here is if I go to a nice restaurant, I can't just walk up to the kitchen and say, I'd like this. This is my order, right? There's somebody to facilitate communicating my order from me to the kitchen, and that's a waiter. So the API is the waiter that's facilitating my request, and then they deliver the response, which is my food, back to me. There are different types of APIs, what we call private SAP APIs, something I mentioned yesterday. IDOCs are just a type of container. It's a type of message. However, they only can be communicated between SAP products, whether it's SAP to SAP on-premise or SAP to SAP cloud. So those IDOCs are typically sent in process orchestration integrations using RFC or remote function calls. That's really getting a little bit more on the technical side. When it comes to process orchestration or integration especially, you're going to have somebody who's an integration expert that's going to need to set that up. So as an implementation consultant, you don't really need to know much more than the fact that there are private APIs and public APIs. The private APIs are often used with process orchestration. The public APIs are typically OData, SOAP APIs, and often used in context of the cloud platform integrations. So IDOCs, and then there's also BOPIs, which are considered private APIs as well. And those are also often used with RFC connections to send messages between systems. So BOPIs are business application programming interfaces. IDOCs stand for intermediate document. There's just different types of containers to bring different types of information from point A to point B. With our public APIs, we have OData and SOAP APIs. The gist of an OData API is that it is typically used for sending more descriptive data. So if we have something like a user data file, information about the employee's name, their address, general employment information, if sending that data from the HR system of record over to your S/4HANA cloud system, that's going to be using an OData API. And OData APIs often have to travel over middleware in that particular situation. Those are usually synchronous requests with immediate response. Synchronous means as soon as the request is sent, the response is immediately returned. A SOAP API is just a different type of container. The information sent with SOAP APIs is usually used for asynchronous messaging, which is error handling. So a request is sent on a scheduled batch job, and then the response is received within that window of maybe it's a 30-minute time frame when each batch job runs. So that can be sent, the response can be sent anytime within that 30-minute window or so. So it's typically used for error handling because asynchronous requests will come in and it'll be like one system will come into S4 and say, I'm requesting you to send me this information, and S4 will send back, I've received your request. That's why error handling, because you kind of have an outbox in one system and then an inbox to receive in the other system. Therefore, you can track if the messages are being sent and then if they're being received, if there were to be some type of an issue. So what we're moving towards is not iDocs or BOPIs, not private SAP APIs moving forward. The new cloud-based integration concept is focused on open APIs using open standards, open development standards like within Cloud Foundry. So OData and SOAP APIs. Cloud Foundry is just an open source methodology of creating open APIs and open communication standards, if you will. We use API Business Hub to find prepackaged content, whether they're APIs or packaged integration packages of APIs. So you're going to need multiple APIs in combination with each other to create one comprehensive integration package to connect different applications with each other. Because typically APIs are just one granular piece of data sent from one system to another system. So the general process would be, if I'm looking for something to resolve an integration request. So we look at the digital discovery assessment and we find that there is a requirement for a specific type of integration. My first stop is going to always be to look at Best Practices Explorer to see if there's an SAP best practice pre-delivered integration package. Again, with on-premise or extended edition, there's very few of these prepackaged integrations compared to Essentials because you're going to have more complex landscapes within this particular area as opposed to Essentials. So you can take a look here. And what I like to do is, instead of trying to expand every single solution scope area, is I will take a look at the best practices content library. This bookmark changes every quarter. You can see that because whenever a bookmark references the URL of a specific release, I'm sorry, it doesn't change every quarter. It changes annually. So every time there is a release, then this particular link is going to change because it's referencing. Basically, a new web page gets published when the new content is released. So I'm just going to select a bunch of lines of business here from the left. And an easy way here is to do Control F, look for integration. So there's this pre-delivered integration, bank integration with SAP multi-bank connectivity. There's this requisitioning. Anytime you see setup instructions, there is some type of a required integration setup to make this particular scope item work. So there's some type of a requisitioning setup before you could then be able to execute the test script itself. There's another bank integration. There's employee integration, S/4HANA enablement. That's not so much a pre-built integration as more recommendations for setting that up. There's a cash application integration, production integration, treasury, workstation. So there's not too many of those pre-built integration packages when we get into the on-prem or any premise or extended edition arena. So first stop is always here to try and figure out if there is some standard best practice that we can follow, because that means that SAP has already built, they've already created the integration, and all we have to do is just activate it. Follow the setup guide to activate the integration. Sometimes the integrations are supported in what's called the Cloud Integration Automation Service tool. So the Cloud Integration Automation Service tool lives in Maintenance Planner. And again, these are only supported for specific integration scenarios. We use this plan for Cloud Integration Scenario application. Most of the other applications are specific to upgrading any premise systems or extended edition systems, although, of course, part of the managed services for extended edition systems is that SAP takes care of the bulk of the technical upgrade. So you don't have to worry about some of those applications. So what we can see here is actually right now, the only relevant integrations that are automated would be Cloud Platform ABAP. And then you have the Fiori Cloud, because remember, we have to set up, this Fiori Cloud would be doing the hub deployment of the Fiori Launchpad. So having that on a separate landscape tenant and then integrating into your core ERP software. And then this other one here, all of these guys are all for Cloud Essentials. So SuccessFactors Employee Central with S/4HANA on-premise, which of course also works for Extended Edition. The characteristic of the difference between an Essentials Edition integration and an on-premise or Extended Edition integration is that there's a firewall with a private cloud, just as there is a firewall with an on-premise deployment of a solution. So here's the scenario. This is in beta right now. So replicating here, and then this is how we'd walk through the process. So in the upper right corner, select the next button. And then you would select your different tenants. And the service is following the integration workflow, and it's going to invoke and execute the bulk of the workflow, or as much of it as it can do. Obviously, I don't have tenants to select here, so I can't invoke a realistic workflow, but that's the general process. Here's the link to the maintenance planner. Just to call it out, there is a step in the roadmap viewer, which happens early in the prepare phase. Again, why you want to follow and complete all the deliverables in the roadmap viewer, because there is an activity where a customer needs to submit a support ticket to request essentially the usage or entitlement of this particular application. There's no additional cost to using it. It's included in the subscription fee. They just have to say, hey, make this application show up on my maintenance planner page. So that's the first step. Best practices explore. Then we want to see, is that integration itself automated? Okay. Then the next stop is, if we didn't find a best practice, it's going to go into the category of customer-driven integration. So now we're looking at the API Business Hub. There are prepackaged integrations, although they're not considered those best practice integrations because they're not scope items. You know, they don't have scope item IDs. So they're prepackaged integrations that are developed from SAP, as well as some of our partners that we develop with. There are also individual APIs. So the first thing I want to do is look at the content type of integration to see integration packages. I'm going to click View More. And you just want to scroll down, load as much of this as possible. And then I can do my Control F keyword search, do S/4HANA, and then look for S/4HANA integration packages. Okay, Commerce Cloud with S/4HANA Cloud for Service, that would be Cloud Essentials. SAP ERP or S/4HANA, that one would work for extended. This one is for Cloud Essentials. So again, we want to go with the ones that just say S/4HANA. This one, Cloud for Customer Integration with S/4HANA. This one would work for us. So say that this is we need to do Cloud for Customer, set up this integration. This is the package that we would use. So S/4HANA on-premise, which means there's part of the integration that bypasses the firewalls that would be in private cloud for Extended Edition. There is typically some type of an integration guide. Looks like this one might not have one, or it might just be in this release note information here. Then we can take a look at the integration itself. And again, this is where you're going to need an integration expert to do this activity, because this is where we get into the different API calls. So you can see that there's integration flows, and then there's typically somewhere along here, some type of value mapping of the values between one system mapping and being able to be updated between the other system. So replicating documents, replicating this particular measurement point, replicating plants, price conditions. So there's replication from one side, and then inbound communication coming into S4, outbound communication going from S4 out to the third party. You might be familiar with the fact that in Essentials Edition, we have these applications in the Fiori Launchpad under the header of communication management. Those applications don't exist in Extended Edition, so we cannot set up any integrations directly in the Fiori Launchpad. So we would have to use the Cloud Integration Automation Service to activate an integration that is pre-built. It's a best practice, essentially. And then for anything from the API Business Hub, you're going to be using the Cloud Platform Cockpit, which is, again, a task that you would hand over to the integration experts. So as an implementation consultant, you are able to set up the integrations, and that's part of the responsibilities in the case of an Essentials Edition implementation. Because there's no Fiori app and it requires this extra detailed knowledge of APIs, and a little bit of coding potentially, you are handing this over to an integration expert when you implement on-premise or Essentials, Extended Edition. So this is one of the differences we start to see in terms of setting up and configuring things in the realize phase. Let's say that I didn't find an integration package that suited my needs. The last resort would be to look at the content type of APIs. And now we're going to go to View More. And these are grouped into the specific products themselves. Like, again, this is for S/4HANA Cloud Essentials. So we are going to load the rest of this page and then Control Find S/4HANA. And this is what we would look at. So this would include all of the APIs that are available for S/4HANA on-premise. APIs for S/4HANA on-premise looks like they are not listed out like they are for some other products. They're just in this particular document. So you can find this information here. You also have the ability in your system through some of the with one of the extensibility apps called Custom CDS Views to actually generate APIs from the system itself. So again, instead of using the backend tools to hard code any type of process orchestration integration, you can actually use your Custom CDS Views application, even though it says Cloud, and usually we assume that's Cloud Essentials. The CDS Views extensibility app is available in Extended and on-premise as well. The way that we can figure out the applications that are available is to look at the Fiori Apps reference library. So here's the link to the reference library. And in the reference library, I'm just going to keyword search for extensibility. Actually, we'll do CDS Views. Okay. And we will go Custom CDS. So Custom CDS Views shows us a nice little screenshot. This is an old user interface here, but gives you a gist of what it would look like. And you can toggle, as long as you can toggle between these, it means that it's supported for both on-premise Extended and Cloud Essentials. So being on this page, if I click App Documentation, it's going to jump me into the help portal for on-premise or Extended. So now I can find in the right-hand side, left-hand side of the screen, these are all of the supported extensibility applications. Okay, so here we can see Custom CDS Views. We're able to create these views, and CDS Views allow you to essentially generate access to the system, so you can generate APIs. You can also use these to pull data from the database and model it in case the analytics, the pre-built analytics that are available don't satisfy your reporting needs. So it allows you to model data in the case of analytics, as well as create a combination of entities together, pull a few different data sources together, generate an API that would then allow a third party to consume that data from the S4 system. So it's another way to create the cloud-based extensions and integrations of consuming data from the S4 system without coding anything directly in the backend, using those classic extensibility tools, which generally enable you to create whatever you want, but also things that are unstable. Okay. The API Business Hub is really where it's at when it comes to customer-driven integrations. And anytime we're in that customer-driven integration area, it means that the customers are responsible for owning the integration and maintaining it over time. Okay, cloud mobile services has to do with development of applications and making them enabled to be used with mobile and also to send push notifications. That's going to be listed under the services of Cloud Platform. So you'll find information about that here. That's more of a development thing. So you're developing applications that are available to be mobile enabled. And then in terms of setting up the integration there, that gets more into the technical side of you're going to need a technical integration expert to develop that. Okay. Oh, I don't know why. I guess those slides must be, oh, it looks like some of the information I had there was not actually copied over. So the integration solution advisory methodology was something that's created that allows you to have a methodology for setting up and this is really dedicated towards the core integration experts. There's a really good blog. Let's go ISAM. There's a really good SAP blog that talks about the integration advisory methodology that I'll send to you in chat. And it defines these guidelines to allow architects of integrations to set up these the integrations and to essentially assess your current integration landscape and then be able to determine in the event of trying to convert some of those classically on-premise process orchestration, process integration integrations over to the more cloud-based model. It defines this methodology that allows them to assess and review and then develop a new integration landscape. Okay. We are going to take a quick 5-minute break, and I'm going to figure out why some of these slides are not showing up in my deck here. And I've got 25 minutes after the hour, and let's come back at 30 minutes after the hour, and we will check back in with the last bit of our integration content and move forward from there. All right, quick break. Please come back at 30 minutes after the hour. Okay, come on back from break, and the issue has been resolved. Okay, so next we're talking about hybrid connectivity options for setting up integrations in a more complex landscape. Generally, if a customer has an existing on-premise centric landscape, so they're just integrating a few cloud applications, they're probably going to want to stick with the integrations that they know. Of course, we always recommend moving towards the cloud-based integrations. However, an on-premise centric landscape, probably going to stick with process orchestration. Generally, we use process integration orchestration interchangeably because process orchestration is actually using the exact same, it's called the advanced adapter extended. So it uses the same engine that process integration does for just integrations. In addition to that, it has additional functionality on top of this that allows for setting up workflow and some additional functionality that just process orchestration has. So process orchestration is basically PI, but better, okay? So we often will refer to it just as process orchestration. If someone says process integration, they just mean that core adapter engine extended functionality for setting up just the integration itself. Process orchestration is functionally a middleware that's installed and built on premise, and it's built, in the SAP GUI in the backend of the system. It can be used to integrate SAP or non-SAP cloud applications, as well as SAP or non-SAP on-premise applications. It has complete functionality for application to application or A to A functionality, business to business, business to government functionality, and it's also available to be hosted within Cloud Platform. So there's actually a process integration functionality where you can have your process integration hosted in Cloud Platform. So that's kind of like a baby step into the more cloud-based integration arena by still using PIPO, but having it hosted in Cloud Platform. So it's just one of the components of the Cloud Platform integration suite. And then if a customer has a more cloud-centric landscape, so generally more cloud-based products, or they just want to move more towards that cloud-focused methodology here. So in that hybrid landscape, when we're going from any premise to cloud or cloud to cloud, let's just focus on any premise to cloud right now. You can use process orchestration. You can use Cloud Platform, the integration suite. There is within Cloud Platform a couple different components like Cloud Platform Connectivity. Cloud Platform Connectivity is specifically point-to-point integration. We also call this Cloud Connector. So Cloud Connector is used to create a secure tunnel between a cloud application and an on-premise application. Otherwise, data from cloud will get blocked by the firewall as it goes to an on-premise or an extended edition or a private cloud system. So it's just point-to-point, meaning it just creates a secure tunnel that APIs are able to travel through. It's not really truly a middleware. It just creates that secure tunnel for APIs to travel through between the two applications, on-premise and cloud. Okay. Then we have the core Cloud Platform integration, which is middleware, which is used to connect cloud to cloud. Okay, so you have to use Cloud Connector to go cloud to on-premise or cloud to private cloud or cloud to any premise, because you need to have something to open up that secure tunnel to bypass the firewall. And then cloud to cloud, we can use the core Cloud Platform integration. Another option is to use what are called Cloud Platform Open Connectors. Those Cloud Platform Open Connectors are pre-built integration packages specifically to connect with, right now, 150 plus pre-built non-SAP applications. So the connectors, 150 plus connectors are pre-built to connect with non-SAP applications like Salesforce Cloud and many different other types of cloud solutions. Regardless of the application's backend in this situation, the open connectors create a unified API layer and a standard implementation across every environment, which is why we like to stick with that open standards, open communication model, because it allows us to do things like that. With cloud to cloud, again, cloud platform integration, cloud platform open connectors. And by the way, you can use a combination of these. So you can use process orchestration on premise in combination with cloud platform integration. Cloud platform integration is never going to replace process orchestration. It's not designed to replace it, but it is designed more as a complement. So you can use both of those for hybrid landscapes. We already talked through how we find integration content. Just reiterate one more time, with core data services, we are able to do a few different things. Core data services let you what we call design access to the database without actually editing the core database or the SAP core content itself. So in this case, you have an application in the Fiori user interface that you use to build custom database access. So pull specific data sources from the database, model that data in analytics without ever accessing the database directly. So again, sticking with that cloud-focused methodology of being able to pull data from the database without actually editing, without doing things in the backend, without using customizing transactions. Okay, custom CDS views can also be easily exposed. This is just the functionality of the custom CDS views app as OData services to fetch data from the database and provide access for a third party to consume that data. It's available in the Fiori Launchpad, that application, for both S/4HANA as well as S/4HANA Cloud, both deployments of S/4HANA Cloud. However, additional capabilities to develop and maintain CDS views are supported for Cloud Extended Edition and any premise via external tools. And this is what we're looking at on the screen. You can use external tools like HANA Studio. You can use Web IDE to create application UIs. And then also you can display data of the CDS view source in the published applications. So for example, you could use HANA Studio to create an ABAP project where you generate an OData service from a CDS data source. You could then create an application UI in Web IDE to display data of that CDS source, and then you can view the Fiori application in your Fiori Launchpad. Okay. So CDS views, again, the custom core data services or custom CDS views Fiori application is supported for any premise and both editions of cloud. However, what you see on the screen right now is only for extended and any premise because you're using additional tools like HANA Studio and Web IDE. Okay, with business-to-business integration, typically electronic data interchange is the computer-to-computer exchange of standard business documents, like purchase orders, invoices, inventory levels. EDI software solutions facilitate the exchange of these business documents and data across a variety of platforms and programs by establishing a private connection from one business to another. In order to compete just generally in that e-commerce arena, the business needs to support EDI to XML interoperability with supply chain partners because XML is much more user-friendly to people being able to interpret the information in a document. EDI, unless you are an expert in this and you're familiar with reading EDI code, very confusing, not user-friendly. It's designed for computers to interpret. So a lot of the integrations these days will at some point transform the EDI code into XML code. The supported methods of exchanging business documents in B2B scenarios would be process orchestration, of course, comprehensive B2B functionality, cloud platform integration, Again, why you use a cloud platform-based integration is because it minimizes the effort and the cost for operations and maintenance of maintaining the underlying middleware and just the infrastructure that keeps the software running, right? Because it takes that technical management out of your daily tasks. Another tool is the Ariba Cloud Integration Network Gateway. This solution is supported by Cloud Platform, and it integrates SAP Ariba solutions. Ariba is used for sourcing and procurement into a customer's existing infrastructure. This integration gateway specializes in supply chain and procurement processes that have this defined set of message types and mappings. You can also use third-party EDI partner solutions. Just so you know, ultimately on the roadmap, SAP plans to provide all of the B2B capabilities that are available in process orchestration into the cloud platform integration. So at the end of the day, customers can just choose, I want on-premise versus I want cloud, rather than saying, well, we need to have the process orchestration integration because it has more comprehensive functionality. What we're looking at on the screen is this very cool tool called the Integration Advisor that allows you to define and implement standards for that business document exchange that can involve many different complex processes depending on the business need. So the integration needs and complexity can really vary based on the business. This particular tool uses crowdsourcing and machine learning to determine and propose the most efficient integration interface based on your, as a customer, unique business-to-business scenario. So it has a comprehensive library of the documentation, of the code lists, of all frequently used B2B standards and the de facto standards. And then basically customers are sharing their different B2B integrations so that this advisor can use that as a massive database to search through and then propose the most effective integration. Okay, a couple questions in chat. So you would not use Cloud Connector for S/4HANA Cloud to Ariba connection. You would need to, because again, remember that Cloud Extended Edition has a firewall that you have to bypass, because any private cloud solution has a firewall, just like any on-premise solution has a firewall. So you need Cloud Connector to bypass the firewall. Okay, transports of data into and out of S/4HANA is encrypted. How about the S/4HANA system itself? Assume the data is not generally encrypted. That's a great question, and probably for someone that's a deeper integration expert than I am. There's a lot of good information in the help portal that talks about process orchestration and cloud platform integration and the really nitty-gritty technical details. Okay, we already saw a demo of the Cloud Integration Automation Service, and the Cloud Integration Automation Service in the on-premise situation, so in the example that we walked through, starts with S/4HANA, then goes to Cloud Connector, again, because if we're integrating with another cloud solution, like in our example, we were connecting with Employee Central, which is a third party, well, not, it is a third party, but it's an SAP solution. The SuccessFactors Employee Central HR system of record. We have to use Cloud Connector to bypass that private cloud firewall, and then Active Directory to be able to run and use this particular service to connect with a cloud solution. We also, with any integration you're going to be that is running through Cloud Platform, you're going to be using the Cloud Platform Identity Authentication Service. And then, of course, Maintenance Planner is used to run that integration workflow. With the S/4HANA deployment options, I just want to show you a little visual here to point out the differences. So with cloud to on-premise or cloud to cloud, this is Cloud Essentials Edition over on the right-hand side of the screen. We have dedicated applications in the communication arrangements group of applications on the Fiori Launchpad. So maintaining communication users, communication systems, and then you activate. This is only for best practices or scope item based integrations. You activate that integration using the Communication Arrangements app. Since we don't have those applications available for AnyPremise or Extended Edition, we need to use the Process Orchestration or Integration, which uses the Advanced Adapter Engine Extended function. So this is where we find this in the NetWeaver SAP GUI backend to set up that process orchestration connection, which generates RFC or remote function call connections. And then if we are going to use a platform integration, in this case, cloud to on-premise, you're setting up a cloud connector integration. So cloud platform, this is cloud connector. Process orchestration integration can also be defined and run through cloud platform. You would use the cloud platform cockpit for setting up these integration services, which is also in the case of Cloud Essentials Edition. If you have to use your own customer-driven integration, even though there are a lot of pre-built integrations that you can use through best practices, you can still run into the situation where that doesn't satisfy your needs. So you still might need to go to the API Business Hub and reuse one of those pre-built integrations. You would also set that up using the Cloud Platform Cockpit over here. Okay, integration monitoring. We have a few different tools that allow you to do this. Whoops. First off, I just want to point out that Solution Manager can do integration monitoring with the application operations component pretty much across any system. You have to set up those systems as managed systems within Solution Manager, but as soon as you do that, it's able to pull data across and regardless of the type of integration. So if it's process orchestration, if it's cloud platform integration, it's able to pull data to monitor those integrations. Cloud Platform also has its own within the within the Cloud Platform Cockpit. It has its own integration monitoring functionalities. So of course there's that. Then you have Solution Manager with its focused run capabilities that are just really dedicated to monitoring process orchestration. And then they're really comprehensive across all integrated applications, as long as you have set them up as managed systems in Solution Manager, which you can set up any other SAP Cloud products, I believe also non-SAP products, as managed systems, which then it can collect that operations data. There are several different functionalities within the application operations component, very detailed. That's a very detailed, comprehensive area, the application operations, that collects a ton of information about integration. So I'd say that is your most efficient one-stop shop area with the integration monitoring capabilities. And by the way, just a future offering that's planned for the roadmap is that Focused Run. So Focused Run has many capabilities and is designed primarily as a tool for advanced integration monitoring for customers that have to manage complex, large integrated landscapes, or for service providers that are managing a lot of different customer landscapes across the board. It has a deeper drill down functionality than just the core Solution Manager integration monitoring. It allows you to drill down to the RFC connections on a single execution level. So it has deeper functionality, and it's designed for the really large customers with complex landscapes or those service providers managing many different customer landscapes. Right now, Focused Run is just provided as an on-premise product as a part of the Solution Manager suite. With the prevalence of our cloud customers growing, it's ultimately planned on the roadmap to deliver Focused Run as part of the Cloud ALM portfolio running on Cloud Platform, which would then make it available and supported for the Cloud Essentials Edition. Okay. On this next page, we have the interface integration monitoring with AIF, or Application Interface Framework. It was just sort of worth mentioning. However, you really do have the comprehensive application operations integration monitoring within just the core solution manager application operations component. So this is just kind of an add-on, if you will. In the application layer, app-related interface logic like business validations, business mappings can be distributed through different technologies. Some interface logic can be implemented in user exits or business add-ons, while other logic could be defined in different coding places or custom code. So in general, this is just focused on interface monitoring, which means applications communicating with each other on the interface, like user interface layer. Just in general, even if you have the best and most comprehensive middleware technology, you can still have failed IDOC posting or failed service calls in that application layer that require some additional monitoring and a quick resolution. So validating and reprocessing any sales order that might have been a failed message. So this application interface framework is a solution designed to make it easier to manage application to application, specifically, or process integration, by letting you create, deploy, you can monitor and manage all of the application interfaces in this one specific application. So it lets business users reduce the time that they might need for error handling, because business users can monitor the application interface communication in the Fiori Launchpad if, of course, you're given permission to these applications. So these are applications that can be configured and enabled in the Fiori Launchpad. They're supported for any premise, extended edition, and cloud essentials as well. Okay, that's all for integration. And let's go ahead and begin with extensibility content. So extensibility for S/4HANA Cloud Extended Edition. The extensibility concept really focuses on, I know this is a very busy slide, but it really focuses on customers, if I've not mentioned it and repeated it enough and really hammered it into your brains, is really focused on number one, using all of the in-app extension capabilities that are available in the Fiori Launchpad. So the first thing that needs to happen there is whoever is that Fiori configuration implementation expert on the implementation project, because it really does require a dedicated knowledge, very specific knowledge, and it's not for the implementation consultants to set up. It is for somebody who is specifically an expert in configuring and setting up and making sure that people are permissioned to access these applications in the Launchpad. So using the in-app extension capabilities wherever possible. Of course, within the in-app arena, we can also do classic extensions, but we try to do this first, we do this second, and then this last resort. So always trying to focus on the cloud-based integrations. In-app extensibility, just the gist of this, is an approach directly within the software stack. We often call in-app extensibility key user in-app extensions, and that just means that we're using those extensibility apps in the Fiori Launchpad, like custom fields and logic, custom business objects, and the key user part of it means that these applications are permissioned to key users or super administrators. People that have permission to those applications can do the in-app extensions. It is still at its core just in-app extensibility. It's more just referring to who can be permissioned to use those in that front-end Fiori Launchpad user interface. With these applications, you can only use released or whitelisted APIs for both in-app extensibility, or if you used custom CDS views to generate an API to be used for maybe side-by-side extensibility, so allowing a third party to consume that data. The system will only ever generate or allow you to implement whitelisted or approved, what we called managed extensibility. So managed extensibility is also in that in-app arena, It means that SAP is literally managing what you can do or apply to the system. This, again, ensures the system's integrity during those upgrades. Classic in-app extensibility refers to having full flexibility to develop extensions and modifications that can potentially affect the SAP core code, that modifications to the core code only supported in any premise, not supported in extended edition, although all of the other classic extensibility tools are available for extended. This is a very lifecycle unstable approach. We recommend not using these as much as possible. Your second approach, if you cannot do an in-app extension, is to use Cloud Platform and decouple the software. So decouple any very specific advanced integrations or extensions that you've designed rather than having them in the system itself, coded into the database using HANA Studio or the ABAP Workbench tools, actually decoupling or separating those from the SAP core software. So a much broader scope of functionality and tools that you can do there. And then just again, overall summary here for customization and extensions, you essentially have within extended standards, so you still have those standard applications, only can do modifications with any premise, in-app side-by-side, classic with no modifications. That's why we say the database is partially open. Okay. For in-app extensibility, some of the big things that you can do would be to adapt existing Fiori UIs, which means we turn on this function, which allows you to do what's called runtime authoring. Runtime authoring lets you customize the user interface of an application. I mean, you can even you can add new custom fields, you can move applications around on the screen, add additional sections. What you can do is determined based on the application itself. Again, what it will allow you to do. It's not going to let you do something that would make the system unstable. So that's also ties into here, creating a custom user interface. You can also customize forms or email templates with the Fiori apps in the system. However, it's super basic. You can add a header, a footer, and a logo. If you want to do advanced functionality or customization, you're going to use let's see if we still have Discovery Center open. You are going to use, we do not, so let's go back to Discovery Center. You can use SAP Cloud Platform, Forms by Adobe. Okay, must have a bad link there. So here's Forms by Adobe here. This allows you to download a desktop tool called the Adobe Lifecycle Designer. And this Lifecycle Designer allows you to edit and customize form templates and then upload those and use those in your, you can also translate them and use those in your S/4HANA Cloud, S/4HANA, any premise systems. This uses the Adobe document services. So those same services that are available within the classic ECC or SAP ERP solution, but it is more comprehensive and it is more lifecycle stable. So we recommend using this instead of that classic Adobe document services functionality. You can also create custom analytical queries, custom business logic using only released or approved business add-ins, or create, it's also called create your own enhancement, if you will. So custom business logic, you'll use or see the term enhancement in addition to that business logic terminology. Create custom fields, create custom business objects. With custom business objects, you can actually generate and build kind of simplified applications off of a business object. You could create custom fields, add those to the user interface of that object. You could use workflow to tie a couple of those applications together in a workflow. You could then permission that and make it available for end users within all of these things are just directly within the Fiori Launchpad. So there's just different ways. You know, it's not the classic way that people with SAP ERP have been trained to build things like custom business processes in the ERP system using those additional custom code type tools. So probably a bit of retraining of the developer workforce to use more of these. And of course, these applications could easily be used also by key users, people without developer knowledge, because they are user-friendly and kind of point and click. And yes, these in-app extensions are at the front end side, so the user interface layer. The Fiori, these are all Fiori applications. Okay, just to give you an example and differentiate some of the classic extensibility capabilities in S/4HANA Cloud Extended versus AnyPremise is what you see on the screen here. So some examples specifically of custom development techniques. There's an entire very detailed extensibility guide that probably during the next break, I will have to look up that link and grab it for you. It is in a very detailed SAP note about this information, but that SAP note document download is many, I can't even remember, it's like 50 pages long of very detailed scenarios. This is just one of the scenarios that breaks down the differences here. So if you did custom development to build a new application in AnyPremise, you could use the SAP GUI DynPro transaction applications. However, just in general, we always recommend building Fiori applications instead. So not building those older transaction applications at all. Use code generation, dynamic programming, which uses unrestricted ABAP, not whitelisted, to build an application using the HANA Extended Application Services. This is direct access to the really low level. So the really the low level means the base, the lowest level code would be machine code, just the zeros and ones binary language. Other low level code is referring to the C++ code underlying the software itself. So using direct access to that low level code in the database, or using clones of SAP objects, which again creates a high risk of inconsistencies after an upgrade. Some other tools that you can use: Transaction SE80, Eclipse, IDE, Business Add-ins. For Extended Edition and AnyPremise, you can use those key user and manage in-app extensibility tools in parallel or in combination with the classic development tools. But again, there are differences between the types of extensions. When you do these backend tools, you're not having the system do any type of a check where it's saying, this is going to make the system unstable, so I'm just not going to save this. If you're using the extensibility apps in the front-end UI, in the Fiori Launchpad, then it's going to do checks when you save any type of extension. Anytime you try to save an extension, if it makes the system unstable, it just won't save it, right? So you essentially have this additional check that allows you to verify if that is a lifecycle stable application or extension, whatever you're building. An example that would be supported for custom development for AnyPremise and Extended would be to use Business Object Processing Framework with classic ABAP, use the Business Object layer, generic integration layer to develop a web UI-based app, or use Web, DynPro, or Floor Plan Manager apps without the Business Object Processing Framework. So again, still classic extensibility tools, we recommend against it, but those are the types of tools that are for Extended Edition. These tools are at such a low level that they are not available for Extended. Okay, those are all editing the SAP core code type data. So no database, or prior to an update or an upgrade, the classic extensions must be activated and part of those released transports. So with those extensions, they will require customer regression testing And the amount of custom code and these custom extensions you have is going to just increase that timeline required for customer testing, which of course is a task just for customers to do. You can't outsource that even through the enhanced managed services to SAP. No database access, no HANA applications type editing are supported, no operating system layer middleware access, no OS level agents are supported, no OS layer S/4HANA Java access, no OS layer additional databases are supported, no OS layer Cloud Connector agents are supported. So Cloud Connector would have to be done within Cloud Platform, not directly in the system. Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that SAP note. So if everyone wants to click the link that was just in chat, that is the SAP note that will bring you to the comprehensive extensibility guide for S/4HANA Cloud Extended Edition. Okay, just to give you some more information, some of the other Fiori extensibility apps that are available for any premise and extended edition are the Extensibility Inventory app, which is pretty cool because it tells you the objects that have been modified, where they have been used, and the transport status. However, this one area here, who changed and when they made changes, is actually only in Cloud Essentials. This is a little bit more of a clear visual to see that adapting the Fiori user interface at runtime. So creating a custom user interface. This allows you to, if you have the administrator business role assigned to your user, and then you'd need the business role to adapt whatever application you want to play with. First off, you need to check the help portal to determine, well, have those business roles assigned, and then check the help portal to determine if extensibility is allowed for the application that you want to play with. Then you would go into your Launchpad, open up that application, and you can select from your user in the upper right corner this Adapt UI functionality. You'll then jump into runtime authoring mode, where you can do things like add fields, rename fields, create additional groups, remove information, create custom fields whenever you are also adding new fields. So you can add any field that is supported for the business context of that application. You can also make those fields available to be used in the relevant other applications that have that same business context or other reports, so that you could build a custom analytical query and pull in data from that field. You can also use the custom fields and Logic app to, of course, create custom fields. So you have kind of two different ways to create custom fields. If I was in an application doing this runtime authoring and I select to add an additional field, I can actually jump directly into the custom fields application by clicking that plus, or I can go directly into the custom fields and Logic app, create my new field here. Once it's then published, I'd be able to see it in this list of available content to add to the fields. Depending on the type of field, and yeah, I'll just say that, depending on the type of field, the business context really, which you also can find within the help portal, which business context is supported for different fields, that's supported for different types of applications. And these are Fiori applications again. So some Fiori applications just don't allow extensibility. Some of them do. And that's just extensibility using the front end Fiori UI layer applications. You could, of course, really customize them however you want in the backend transactions. So in this case, there were 9 UIs, so other related applications, and then other related reports that I could enable this field for. Search relevance means that we can make this available in the enterprise search, which would be towards the top of the screen in the upper right, kind of upper right header area. So if I were to keyword search for data that happened to be entered in this custom field, I'd be able to find the information because we've made it search relevant. Again, depending on the business context and the particular field that we are adding, It might allow you to apply an email template to it or a form template. Business scenarios is referring to the business process that you could map this to. And then again, depending on the type of field, you might have the system pre-generate OData APIs, SOAP APIs. So SOAP for asynchronous, typically error handling of messages. OData is synchronous messaging, often uses middleware to communicate. Business application programming interfaces, or BAPIs, IDOCs. These are private SAP APIs just to go to SAP products. So if it generates for you an OData API, which some of them do, you could then use that. So you could create a custom CDS view, because in this case, it didn't give me an OData API. So I could generate that API through another method. But then if it gives me the API right away, I can use that to basically expose this custom field data and make it available to be consumed by a third-party application, whether it's SAP or non-SAP, and we would set up that communication through the Cloud Platform Cockpit. For custom logic, also referred to as designing your own enhancement. So custom logic can be used to trigger things. So if I create a new customer-based project, we can have, I think in this case, for the business context, there's about 5 different business add-ins that are whitelisted. So that's part of the managed extensibility area. It's still in-app extensibility, but it's managed because SAP is controlling the APIs or the add-ins that you can apply. Okay, so sending an email, and there's about 4 other ones besides just this. Okay, and then data source extensions are a little different. These can be used to retrieve data of additional fields that are delivered in the applications, in the Fiori applications that contain data sources that have been released for using in ABAP code or other data sources. So there's a different application, or excuse me, this is data source extensions. So in this section, you can create, you can edit, you can delete these data source extensions to enable using this field in a pre-delivered data source somewhere else. Custom business objects let you create your own business objects to use to use essentially your own small database tables. So for a business object, you can kind of create a mini database table, basically a mini Excel table, and have that be the basis of custom applications. You can generate a user interface off of this. You could create custom fields. You could also create an OData service based on the business object to make it available to be consumed by a third-party application. So that's a way in the system, again, that you can create custom applications. There's also an app called Custom Reusable Elements. So that enables you to modularize your custom code, to structure it according to your specific requirements. So you can actually use this app to create custom libraries, to organize the code as you need. It's specifically designed for custom code reuse to support building and designing those APIs or those extensions. So this is another one of the very few, there's only about 2 applications, custom business logic, and this application where you do see any type of code. And you're going to need someone who's more of a developer expert probably to work with this application. We've already talked about custom views quite a bit, so we're going to skip that one. Custom analytical queries is a designer tool for reporting and analysis. It can transform and organize raw data delivered from business documents into grids. It can abstract the process of writing structured queries, so you don't have to use things like SQL to design and to have specialized SQL knowledge to understand that query language or the super technical details to create these. So it's a much more user-friendly application for just your classic business user. And then again, we have the ability to transport extensions using actual Fiori applications now. Previously, you would have to use applications to create your software packages with the backend transaction for object navigation Navigator, which is SE80, or in the Transaction for Package Builder, SE21. You'd have to set up your transport requests, and tasks would need to be created in either the Configure Software Packages app that we see on the screen, or in the backend with the Transport Organizer SE09 transaction. So you could still use those transaction codes, but a bit user-friendly to use these applications instead. Register extensions for transport and configure software packages. These are only available for extended and any premise. Cloud Essentials uses different applications for setting up transports. We are going to take another break, and we will come back and talk about side-by-side extensibility in a little more detail, and then touch on partner add-ons before we move forward into data migration. Okay, let's go ahead and take, since we already took a 5-minute break earlier, let's take another, maybe like an 8-minute break. So I've got about 17 minutes after the hour on my clock. Why don't you come back at 30 minutes or 25 minutes after the hour? Yeah, come back at 25 minutes after the hour. Take like a 7-8 minute break. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put myself on mute. Any questions you think of in the meantime, please send those in chat. All right, come on back from break. I hope you enjoyed our fun fact. The main takeaway, this is one of my favorite books. The main takeaway here is at the end, and a lot of what this book talks about is how to be kind of less unbiased, and just the takeaway is the more you understand the way that your brain is kind of pre-wired to work, the more you can, for certain situations, the more you can say, okay, well, I know that my brain is wired to essentially judge things pretty much immediately based on my gut reactions. And my gut reaction is very much tied to the culture that I grew up in and what I'm used to and the environment and the people that have surrounded me. So what I consider kind of my in-group, right? The people that I spend a lot of time with, and therefore I gravitate towards those people. So when you have these immediate gut reactions to certain situations, the gist is just know that your brain is wired to work that way and say, okay, once we bring in our logic, because our logic takes a couple minutes to catch up to your gut emotional reaction, go, wait, why is it? Just kind of challenge yourself, or, you know, try to kind of challenge other people and have them challenge you about why is it that that was your immediate reaction? What is the alternative, and why not consider that alternative? Okay, so I think at this point we've talked quite a bit about side-by-side extensibility. So we'll move through this pretty quickly. I just want to point out a couple things we've not specifically identified yet, which is something called the Cloud Platform Extension Factory. This is not really a separate part of Cloud Platform. It's truly an integral part of Cloud Platform. So it's not commercialized as a separate solution. It's the go-to kind of cloud native extensibility framework for really any type of development that you do. So it offers this standard method of extending SAP solutions, developing event-driven extensions, applications. This extension factory has a central management plane that provides the capabilities to store metadata of a registered solution. And you can use this to just enhance your overall system landscape. So it's really just the core kind of underlying methodology. With the software developer kit, this is something you want to hand off to the developer team and say, this is a get started quick kit to develop cloud applications. And this is really just kind of a series of resources and documents to say, these are the languages that you can use for developing this type of an application. You're going to use this particular landscape to get started with building this type of integration, this type of application, this type of extension. So it's really just a resource guide to help people get started as soon as possible with development. When we're talking about partner extensions and partner add-ons, there is a pretty rigid and stringent process for ad hoc extensions to get qualified and partner add-ons to be SAP certified. So your two different implementation strategies are to deploy best practices or an SAP model company as the baseline of the system for a customer, and then to customize to meet their requirements, and to essentially use custom code and things to rebuild whatever they currently have in their landscape. What we would strongly recommend is, of course, to follow that cloud methodology, cloud mindset, and decouple the software when it is more complex as much as possible. Use best practices, use the model company as your baseline, build additional content on top using first the extensibility applications, then consider side-by-side extensions. But of course, there are specific tools and functionality that SAP partners have developed based on their, long many years of experience and specific unique situations where they have developed these really interesting solutions that are something you're not going to be able to get with just a cloud platform extension, right? So in that case, make sure that you're always using the qualified or the certified solutions, because they do go through a rigorous certification process. Okay, let's wrap up extensibility and move forward onto data migration, because we've got quite a bit of information for data migration. So starting with an overview, I think we might have seen this slide before. The S/4HANA Migration Cockpit is a ready-to-use solution that supports customers in migrating their data to Extended Edition, AnyPremise, and to Cloud Essentials. It uses template-based migration objects like customers or suppliers, pre-delivered by SAP based on the customer's solution scope. The tool also does automated mapping between the source data that's uploaded or that's migrated to the S/4HANA target values and generates any migration programs so that you don't have to do any programming on your own to do that mapping. There's also a step-by-step guidance tool that allows you to walk through the entire process of migrating the data, of validating, of simulating the import, and then executing the import or migration of the data. There are actually test scripts that detail these specific processes for transferring data using files and transferring data using staging tables that you can find in Best Practices Explorer. Again, best practices for on-premise, for Cloud Extended Edition, because it has that essentially same functional scope. We're going to find this under Database and Data Management. And then you've got data migration to S/4HANA from file and data migration to S/4HANA from staging. The last migration process is not listed here as a scope item. But it is clearly detailed out in the help portal. Okay, so here is the link to the first one, and here is the link to the second. Okay, there we go. So first off, transferring data using files. This is really geared towards customers that have small to medium amounts of data. It's a bit more time intensive in terms of the implementation consultants downloading the file templates, manually populating the templates from however the customer extracts their data from their legacy systems and provides it to you. So again, more so for smaller customers. Supported for any deployment option. Transferring data using staging tables uses a separate database as the staging database. It has to be a HANA database system. And then it is the intermediary in between your legacy system and your target system. So you extract using ETL tools to populate the migration objects in the staging database. And then there's an integration that you would set up ahead of time. And through that integration with the staging database and your target S/4HANA database, that is taken care of through the integration through APIs. That's only supported, or it is supported for all deployment options. However, there are a few kind of slight differences between the staging database. So with an AnyPremise system, there's a couple different ways to set up the staging database. With extended, again, there's a couple ways to set up the staging database. With Essentials, you can only set up the staging database using a database as a service, which is provided by Cloud Platform. So it's hosted in Cloud Platform. Really, that's probably the easiest and most effective way for any of the solutions, though. And then last, transferring data directly from an SAP system is only supported for AnyPremise and Extended Edition. Okay, transferring data using files, small, medium amounts of data based on XML template files, staging tables filled by ETL tools, which are then migration objects are filled by ETL tools, which are then integrated to your target system. Transferring data directly is data being selected and extracted directly from the SAP system and funneled into your target system. There are a couple of different support services that customers might want to take advantage of, especially in the event of doing a selective data transition, because you're consolidating multiple databases. and potentially even deploying a two-tier ERP, additional smaller tenants with specific industry or line of business scope. So SAP Value Assurance provides data migration support. The programs here ensure a successful transition to your new target system by addressing customers and partners that need to build or review the data migration concept for the transition from on-premise SAP solutions to those based in the cloud. And then there's an SAP data management and landscape transformation team. This team offers a holistic approach to the entire data-related needs in specifically selective data transition scenarios. There is a very cool brand new data migration course just released March 2020. Here's the link to the course. In OpenSAP, all of the OpenSAP courses are available for anybody to access. They're all free. And since this course is already run, you can access all of the training content just ad hoc whenever you want to complete it. Oh, there's also a dedicated, in the Cloud Appliance Library, there's a dedicated migration cockpit system that you can deploy. So the first transition method is using files. We'll walk through this method in a little more detail, just because the staging method also follows the exact same process. You just select something at the very beginning that says, I'm going to transfer using staging tables instead of files. So number one, this is the guided workflow. You validate data, you convert the values. That is the automated mapping between the target, between the values that you've uploaded and the target S/4HANA database values that data will be mapped to, simulate the import, and then execute the import. So the process here is to have the customers extract the data from their source system, SAP or not SAP, and then the implementation consultants go into the starter system in the Essentials Edition situation, or they go into the Sandbox or development system. In the case of Extended Edition, they download all of the templates for each migration object that the customers will need data migrated for. Then you will populate manually, largely copy and paste, the data into those Excel spreadsheet templates. The one thing to keep in mind, whenever you copy paste, you always need to strip the formatting. So always copy paste values only. Otherwise, it will absolutely corrupt the file. The support tickets that we see submitted are largely due to people corrupting the files because they have not copy pasted and stripped the values. So you first create a new migration project. In this case, we only have the option to migrate from templates, because in this situation, I do not have a staging database integrated with my core system, with my target system. So it knows that I can only create a migration project where I'm migrating data from templates. Okay, so if we take a look at our, take a look at our information here, when we are migrating an object, we can select an object, and actually you don't find this information through the documentation anymore. You would click on the question mark in the upper right-hand corner to open up the Learning Center and the help information. It's going to provide you this link. In the case of Cloud Essentials, it's going to go to the CL or Cloud Essentials library of migration objects. In on-premise or Extended Edition, it's going to go to the OP on-premise library. However, I think you should use both for Extended Edition, because you're going to find different information. I don't know what's doing that. That is very useful in both of the libraries. So this is the library for Cloud, technically Cloud Essentials. And then this is the library for Cloud AnyPremise and Extended. So what we would do is, number one, we have to make sure that you have the business roles or permissions assigned to your user to migrate data. So you have to have a role called the migration expert, And then you also need to assign the business role specific to whatever migration object you are migrating. So in this case, it's cash manager for bank. I would figure that out by clicking on the bank object. And because we are in Cloud Essentials, it's going to tell me the business role to assign to my user and the application. This is the Fiori app that I can verify that just do a spot check. I can verify that my data has been successfully migrated by checking out the Manage Banks app. Now, instead, what you will see over here is if I look at bank, maybe, if I look at bank and I scroll down, it will say, this is the transaction. So that's why I say use both of them, because if you have the Fiori apps configured and enabled, which you should, right, it's going to be easier to use the Manage Banks application to double check rather than the transaction code, right? And also, if you have the Fiori Launchpad, the idea is to get everybody moving towards just using the Launchpad applications instead of transaction codes. This is the area for data migration, just kind of the landing page for on-premise and extended edition. And you want to go to this landing page for on-premise and extended because you can do an extra type of migration that's not available for essentials. So in addition to transferring data using files and staging tables, you can also transfer data directly from an SAP system, and you'll only find the detailed information about this process in this S/4HANA area of the data migration. Okay, we already talked about that. When you upload a template, or if you even use staging tables and start the transfer there, you are able to validate the data initially, convert the values, simulate the import, and execute the import through these different process steps. Click past that and let's talk a little bit more about what you would likely use in the extended edition implementation. Because extended edition, again, typically customers with more complex landscapes, probably more data to migrate. So you would likely be using not the file approach, but the staging table approach. So when we create a new migration project, if we've set up the integration, there's also, you have to activate an additional scope item or business process through submitting a ticket to the service center. So once we do that, there's an integration setup guide that allows you to connect your staging table database or your staging database with your target system. Now it knows we've got an integrated staging table database. So you can now choose this option. You would select your database connection, and then what happens is your target system generates the migration objects in the staging database. So first off, I open up the Migrate Your Data app. I select Transfer Data from Staging Tables. So same process. I create, this is a new project, right? I'm creating a new migration project. So this could be for bank data again. And I would just assign the migration object for bank. Now, when I do that, and I just assign that one object, through that integration with our staging database, that migration object for this specific project gets generated in the staging database. Now the customers are responsible for using and defining the extract, transform, load tools. Typically, SAP Data Services is a good option. There are a few other tools that you can also use that are listed in the training course content. I believe HANA Studio can also be used. There's about, I think, 5 total tools that you can use, ETL tools. So you can use one of those tools, extract the data from your legacy system, design the transform load part of the tool, then populate your staging database. So you're populating the data migration objects, the migration objects in the staging database. Through the integration connection with your target system, that migration object can then be synchronized over here with your project in the target system. So what is absolutely mandatory in this case is that you have to have a staging database. And it needs to be a HANA database. Enterprise. Trying to think of the standard. I believe it's this one. The HANA database as a service. Here's a little bit more information on the technical details of this in the help portal. And there is a free version. There we go, Express Edition. So there's a free version of, it's not the trial, this is just, you know, or excuse me, yeah, it is actually the trial. So the Express Edition is available for free for development and actually productive use up to 32 gigs of RAM or RAM as memory. So this is the trial edition that you would want to use for your staging database. And then it just taps into subscription licensing after the 32 gigs of RAM if you need more than that. Okay, so that's the free Express Edition database as a service that can be easily used. And the extract, transform, load tools are then just up to the customer because they are responsible for defining those to populate the migration objects in the staging database. Okay, so for the source structure of the migration object, a separate staging table is generated for each of those. You can see in this particular migration project, there were several different migration objects assigned: general data, general text, sales data, sales partner. So those are the migration objects that are synchronized. Okay, for data migration, do we need an extra license to use the staging database? Yep, that's true. And I'd recommend using the free HANA Express Edition database. That's a database as a service that is hosted in the cloud application or appliance library, I believe, or deployed through that. Okay, and then you just follow the instructions on that link that I sent in chat to provision it. A couple of extra options for any premise. For example, you could also you could create an additional database schema in your existing landscape as the staging database. That's one potential option. That's only for any premise though. But generally, I think the easiest option is to do the database as a service. So then the last option is to do direct transfer approach. So that's supported for extended edition systems on release 2002 or later. So this just became available and supported for extended edition. That's why it's 2002 or later. A RFC connection or remote function call connects the ERP source system to the S/4HANA target system. The migration cockpit then selects data from the source system by using specific criteria. For example, if you use the migration scenario SAP ERP to S/4HANA, then you would select data using company codes. The relevant company codes would be specified when you create the project. Right now, there are a few specific scenarios. So SAP ERP to S/4HANA, SAP Apparel and Footwear to S/4HANA, and SAP EWM to decentralized EWM based on S/4HANA. The entire process is detailed out in that help portal link that I sent a little earlier about the technical details. You're going to want to hand off this part of the migration, obviously, to some migration experts as they'll be working with the databases themselves. A very cool tool that is only for extended edition and any premise is called the Migration Object Modeler. This allows you to create and to also adjust the SAP standard migration objects. So if the migration object does not exist for specific data that you need to migrate, you can create the specific object or custom object yourself using this migration object modeler tool. You can also take the SAP standard migration objects and modify them using the migration object modeler. Okay, last thing we have time for today is business process testing. Again, business process testing done entirely through the Solution Manager test suite. It's used to manage and to execute testing for Extended Edition and for any premise. You can determine the scope of testing that you need for even cross-system business processes. So you can also design cross-system integrated business process tests. What's a bit different in this test suite as compared to the test automation tool in Essentials Edition is that you have the ability to develop manual tests and actually assign them to people, assign them to users, and develop the automated tests. This uses a different underlying functionality, a different underlying tool to generate the tests, and you can develop these tests using two different tools, either ECAT, which is the classic older tool. Usually you need really developer knowledge to do this because it's kind of a complex, not user-friendly tool to use, but the capabilities are pretty wide. You can do a lot with it, up to however much your knowledge is in that tool. The newer tool that is much more user-friendly is called CBTA, or Component-Based Test Automation, which is a lot more kind of business user-friendly to develop the automated tests. Manual and automated functional tests, you can develop these for SAP and non-SAP solutions, those functional tests. It also does an automated change impact analysis of maintenance activities to reduce the overall testing scope based on software changes, and does smart calculations as well to kind of predict and help you condense those tests to just what's necessary. There are, it supports also the agile development approach within the requirement to deploy process through Focused Build. So that project management tool, Focused Build with Solution Manager. It is integrated with project management, process management, change and release management, defect and incident management, and custom code management components of Solution Manager, and gives you full transparency into the test status and progress for all of the involved parties or people that are testing, with Test Suite Analytics, and of course the automated tests. The components of test management is that everything starts with solution documentation. So remember, when we activate our best practices or model company best practices client, you can then modify that or edit those best practices by creating a copy first and then editing the copy in the solution documentation within Solution Manager. So all of your solution documentation, your business process documentation, whether it's a customer-owned process or a best practice, lives in solution documentation. It is your central library of everything related to business processes. And you then use that library to build your test plans, your test cases, your test packages. And then, of course, you use Solution Manager to assign things to testers. So a test plan is going to be the set of all test cases you need for a specific test phase. Each test plan is going to be designed for a solution, a branch, and the scope based on the solution documentation. So in this particular example, we are breaking down, sort of looking at the tree structure of a business process. Within sales scenarios, you've got order to cash, rush order. Within order to cash, you've got these individual activities that happen. Procurement scenarios is another end-to-end process that kind of separates into additional, more detailed functional processes. So if you just focus in on the sales scenarios and then the procurement scenarios for your test plan, you've got these individual test cases within the plan, and then you can assign them to separate test packages here and assign them to testers, or create them as automated tests. A test plan is a combination of test cases needed for a specific test activity. A test case is the assignment of test configuration to a structure node. So for example, a business process step like create sales order. In the solution documentation, a test sequence can be defined to sort those cases into a specific order and make sure that the testers are doing the test cases in that exact order. So you can even define each specific test, step to a different tester. So you're doing this by defining a workflow. So we mentioned that a test case is the assignment of test configuration to a structure node, like a business process step. The test configuration contains a system data container, a test data container, and one test script. The data from those elements can actually also be reused in several different test configurations. And then last, getting to the most detailed part, the test script describes the components and the sequence of these activities that are to be tested for a selected business process with the technical details, the specific activities or the specific actions. So open this application, enter this data in this field. A test script can contain one or several different steps, organized again in a specific order. You can create automated tests with the component-based test automation tool, CBTA, or the extended computer-aided test tool, which is ECAT, or you can also use third-party tools. CBTA and ECAT both let you create that test configuration and those test scripts for the automated tests, the test data containers, the system data containers. However, again, like I mentioned, ECAT requires development skills. There is a very cool demo system for Solution Manager, which allows you to access this free internet demo system. There's no restriction on how long you access the system, and there are pre-delivered test roles that you can use. Just keep in mind that if you happen to be logged in, so multiple people can actually log in as the same user. If you happen to, and you kind of won't know that, so if you happen to be logged in as someone else as the same user, you'll figure that out if you were both to be going into the test suite, for example, and to create a test, it will actually lock one of the users, whoever tried to create it after the other person, it'll lock your user and say that this is opened in a new browser tab somewhere else. So that's kind of the indication that you're logged in as somebody else at the same time. And that just protects the system from having different test plans overwrite each other. You can access this Solution Manager test demo right here. And if you just scroll down the page, this is where you find all of the users. Click the button for the Launchpad, and you can access that free internet system with preloaded data. And that's about all the detail that we cover in the training course for Extended Edition about the test suite, because the test suite has so many capabilities. There are training courses just dedicated to Solution Manager, just focusing in on the test suite itself. So if you want any more information, and again, as a implementation consultant or a customer project team member, just kind of a generic general project team member, you're not going to be responsible for doing all of these things. You'd have somebody who is an expert in the test suite of Solution Manager, because this really requires its own very specific knowledge. Okay, last couple questions in chat before we wrap the day up. For Extended Edition, is it mandatory to use the Solution Manager test suite? It's not mandatory. If you look at the test suite page in Help Portal, I think it's on the primary page. At the bottom, you'll see that you can use testing tools from other partners with these combinations. So Solution Manager with the Test Data Migration Server, Solution Manager with TDMS plus the Quality Center by HP, and the SAP Test Acceleration Optimization. So there are other test tools from partners you can use. Okay, does CBTA allow the automation of integration scenarios for other systems? It should. To my knowledge, it allows you to build tests that go across other solutions for integrated scenario testing. But to my knowledge, it does let you do that. Okay. Good to know. Quality Center from HP is now called ALM from Micro Focus. I will let the people that maintain this page know. Okay. That is all I have for you. We don't have time to talk about the last deck of content here for operating and supporting the solution, but I've uploaded all of the content in the learning room. Just keep in mind, I'm going to send you this link, but you need to log into Learning Hub first. Open up a new browser tab and then copy paste the link that I will send you. Everything for any live session that you ever join, you will always find the presenter content in the content section of the learning room in the live sessions folder right here. This is my folder for extended edition. And here are the session slides. And I think I accidentally uploaded that half completed integration deck, so I'm going to replace that shortly. Okay, last link I have for you is the live session survey. If you've not completed it yet, we'd appreciate your feedback. Our managers ask us to send that out after every session. You can also add comments, and I review those comments about once a quarter. I'll send you on your way with some silly fun facts. And you can access the recording through the learning room, probably sometime next week. There'll be a post to the feed updates. All right, feel free to drop off the line. Thanks for spending another 2 hours of your day with me on Thursday. I hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend. Thanks again, everyone. Cool. Glad to hear it was helpful.